right, this video starts out with my hair a little bit crazy because I have hat head, but my name's Spencer. This is the Italian Tune-Up. It's a channel about kind of what's happening with cars, content creators, Formula One, racing, and I'm just an all-time car and racing fan. Here's some old school pictures that would be Paul Newman with Bob Bondurant and in an old Can-Am car. This is Mario Andretti racing in Formula One in an old Parnelli Jones race car as that was happening in the 70s. So Italian Tune-Up, welcome to this video. Really the main topic of this video is going to be talking about how HAAS F1 has recently fired Nikita Mazepin. And I'm just going to share some, like a little overview and some of my thoughts on what happened here and why it happened the way that it did. And talk just a little bit about the geopolitical commentary about what's happening in the world and how it relates in Formula One and pay drivers. So let's dive into it. I'm Spencer. This is the Italian Tune-Up. So getting right into this, it's an interesting topic because I'm a huge Formula One fan, and I'm gonna start off also by saying, you know, I'm also a huge HAAS F1 fan. So I'm putting on my HAAS hat here. This is my HAAS Formula One hat, which you can see how filthy it is. I actually wear it all the time. I'm a huge HAAS F1 fan. I just think it's amazing what they brought to Formula One, even though at this point they're currently a back marker. I'm a great fan of there being an American team in Formula One. I think that America has such a history in all types of racing, and it's really possibly underrepresented in Formula One. I think that is very European based, and so they get a lot of Europeans in the sport, but I think it's really cool to have American representation. So I also think that Gene Haas he's an amazing businessman. From what I know of him, he's the type who gets his hands dirty, and like he spends a lot of his time when he's at his company on the shop floor. So I just have a lot of respect for him. You know, he proved himself to be an F1 with a lot of his racing experience. So this video is really to discuss the viewpoint on, you know, is it fair that Nikita Mazepin was fired from the HAAS F1 team in the wake of the Russia invasion of the Ukraine? And I am going to very much use that language. I think that Russia invaded the Ukraine. I wish that more countries in the world were doing more to not only sanction Russia, which I think everybody's kind of like stepped up in that respect, but you know, I guess that I wish there was more that people could do to put in their boots on the ground to help these people. As in many cases, in every case when, you know, someone's being taken advantage of by a larger country that's essentially bullying them and taking them over. So late last week, it was announced that at first, while F1 was in the beginning of their 2022 season, that as the invasion began, a lot of American companies were changing their position on allowing business happen with Russian companies, and especially those owned by the oligarchs, which are essentially the, you know, friends of Putin, who are billionaires who are controlling and the captains of industry of that country. It just happens to be that HAAS had a primary sponsor of a company called Uralkali, which is it's a potash fertilizer producer and exporter, and one of the largest companies in Russia. And it's owned by Nikita Mazepin's father, Dmitry Mazepin, who is essentially, he's very close to Vladimir Putin. So was it just sort of like an American company stance of removing the Collie banners from and logos from its car, ultimately sort of like taking away its sponsorship. Well, the way that really a lot of this worked was the U.S. announced that we couldn't do business with certain companies and these oligarchs in Russia. And since Dmitry Mazepin was, I believe he was on that list, or if not sort of very close to it, HAAS was forced as a business, as an American business, and a United States business. HAAS F1 is based in Kannapolis, North Carolina. And essentially, from a legal standpoint, because of the sanctions that were imposed on Uralkali and on Russia, we could not do, and I say we like I'm in HAAS, but American companies could not do business with companies based in Russia. So there was kind of like a legal standpoint for us once again, for HAAS to really, not conduct business with this Russian oligarch. And essentially, the risk was that, they would be financially cut off. So, there would be no transactions allowed with Russian companies. Thus, HAAS would not be able to receive Russian money, nor would HAAS be able to sort of pay anything over to the Russian company in return. So though the money was pretty much coming one way, it's just the money was going to be cut off. So HAAS took the standpoint of removing the logos and the banners from their car. The HAAS sort of returned to their, I guess, what would be their base livery, which, their livery has changed a couple times. They've had their scandals with the energy drink, Rich Energy, and going black and gold, and then returning to the white with the red logo. And now they removed their Uralkali logo and essentially what looked like making their car look like a Russian flag, and pulled that off of their car. So this was very much of I think a legal based decision that HAAS had to take. You kind of look at it as what was the relationship like, and I think that their relationship really wasn't that good with Dmitry Mazepin. There was some contention in the past with him where Dmitry Mazepin was sort of flexing his sponsorship of the team, and that came when Mick Schumacher, who is a much better driver than Nikita Mazepin, was just consistently having better results. And Dmitry Mazepin said, "I will pull my sponsorship of your team if you don't give my son the car that Mick Schumacher is driving, because we know his car is better." And as much as the team said, "Hey man, these are the same cars, they're equal, we give these guys equal chances to go out, Mick is just a better driver," they were essentially forced to switch cars. And I think Mazepin may have done better for one race, but it really kind of, I think it was a little bit of a placebo, and that because Mick Schumacher came back and started kicking his butt right again. So there maybe was some bad blood on there that made it easy for them to make this legal decision with less consideration and feeling for a company that's been treating them extremely well, even though they were receiving a good amount of funding and sponsorship from this company. So let's look then at, so that would be the legal reason for pulling the logos. Now, if the logos are not on the car, could Dmitry Mazepin still be paying the sponsorship and allow them to go forward? Well, with the sanctions that were put in place, no, it really couldn't, nor would I think he want to sponsor a team where his logo isn't being displayed. So it's a little bit twofold there. But I think ultimately it comes down to that, a U.S. company can't be taking the money from the Russians. So beyond that, as a result, then we had Nikita Mazepin as a driver racing for HAAS F1. And it was, I guess, maybe a week or two before Mazepin was ultimately given notification of firing and that he wouldn't be working for HAAS F1, driving for HAAS F1 anymore. So let's look at like why he was let go. So let's, as far as, and I think it just kind of boils down to him not being a good driver. When you look at Formula One and what the drivers bring into the team coming in from the cold, they bring two things. They bring skill and they bring money. And every F1 driver has to bring in both. Especially if you look at like the drivers that have come up through some of these driver academies, like Lance Stroll, perhaps, like he brought probably a good combination of skill and money, and he was kind of given a lot of flack in the beginning for being a pay driver. Still really is, right? Like he's not as good as a lot of other people, and would he still be in F1 if his dad wasn't paying his way, in a sense? Maybe not. And just because F1 is such a cutthroat and high skill level to be at. But I think he's proved himself over time to be solid in the mid pack, and he has some really good moments where he displays amazing skill and results. If you look at Mazepin, he really only had one season under his belt in being in F1, and that one season he did abysmally. I don't think he scored a single point while he was racing with HAAS. And really, if you look at the reason why he was in F1, I didn't really see him being. I'd have to look back and do some research, but I don't think he was a champion of F3 or F2 to warrant him building a brand based upon his skill set. He really bought his way into F1 through his dad's company, and other drivers when they come into F1. If they don't have I think they all kind of have some type of like a major sponsorship, because racing in the F2 and F3, like you are already responsible for, as a driver, to bring in certain funds to be a part of a team. And it really isn't until that you get to be at the very top of it all, like a Lewis Hamilton or anybody else with multiple championships, that you have financial backing from major corporate sponsors that are just kind of willing to go along with you wherever you go. So he didn't really have any of that. He wasn't good. He was pretty much in the back of every single race that he participated in. And when you take the money away from somebody like that, you have to really consider, like, is this person worth it to be here? And could they do business with him as a driver? Well, maybe. I guess I don't know if they could pay him as a Russian and being tied to his dad's business. Maybe there could be some controversy over there. Could they be sending money to him in a Russian bank account anyway? Probably not, because a lot of those SWIFT ties are broken. So maybe if Mazepin had some company outside of Russia, and outside of any sort of Russian financial institution, he could perhaps stay being a driver for HAAS F1. But did they really want him? And that is, if he doesn't bring in the money in, then why keep this horrible driver? Like, he's not good enough to be in F1. And I think he really kind of showed that within his first year. There wasn't any sort of moment where everyone was just like, oh man, did you see how great Mazepin did? It was really more of a comparison to someone like Pastor Maldonado, who earned the nickname Crash Door because he couldn't even keep the car on the track. And so, no matter what, F1 is a business, and F1 and the teams in it have to do what makes the most sense for them. And that is, staying viable and afloat as a business. And to do that, you either need money or great skill. And as it looks, I'm sure they're either looking for one or the both. HAAS F1 as they move forward, even though they have temporarily named the young Fittipaldi driver to come in and take the place. Something else I wanted to touch on was that another driver, former F1 driver Daniel Kvyat, had come out and said this situation, meaning the invasion of Ukraine, should not have an impact on sports people. And that is also incorrect, because there, in any large sports, there's some type of a governing body. And that governing body gets to set the rules. And these athletes have an option of whether they want to carry their name being associated with the flag of that country. And honestly, let's say a person loves the sport more than they love their country. Honestly, they have the right to and the option to defect, and seek political asylum in another country that would allow them to compete should they desire. It's really kind of a question of where do your loyalties sit, and are they with your country of origin? Are they with the country that you live in? In some cases, we see people are born in a country but perhaps compete for another. So it's really on the person of where their beliefs are. Do they believe more in the sport, or do they believe in the country? And when you believe in the country who's perhaps not doing things that are good for the world, and everybody else says you can't play anymore, and if you're going under that banner, there's a good chance you won't get to play anymore. And so, all of this sort of taken in consideration, I think Daniel Kvyat is wrong. Sure, it's great that sport is meant to be pure, but there is still that factor that, if representation and kind of like, who's funding you to get there. And if you're funded on blood, maybe you shouldn't be there. So I guess it's just sort of a topic if you want to make a comment on. If you hate what I'm saying, by all means, make a comment in there and call me an idiot. I don't really care. So F1 has dual responsibilities. It's, it's both as a business and a sport. F1, it's not like track and field in a sense where I'm sure, there's an expense that goes along with that. But in all honesty, you need a track and a stadium for someone to run. And it's, a personal skill and training and conditioning that have created an athlete that's capable of doing some amazing things. But in the end, it's really just a person in their body and shoes. And F1 is extremely expensive. These cars are super expensive to run. There's the whole logistics of moving everything around the world. There are costs associated with F1 that would not achieve and are not comparable to any other sport. It's not like golf where it's a guy, shoes, golf clubs, and slacks in a polo shirt. It's just more complicated than that. It's not the same thing, and it's not really comparable. So I can understand sports being neutral, but F1 is a combination of business and there's a lot more involved. And, I'll say this, there's a lot of factors that come together that say HAAS really had no choice. I think the Russians' activities and Vladimir Putin's activities caused this lack of funding. And Nikita Mazepin was not good enough to stay without the funding. Thus, Nikita is not good enough to stay on his own, and he had to go. HAAS has the option to move on with new talent, and they really probably want somebody who's more comparable to, I would call him Baby Schumi, but Mick Schumacher's skills as a second driver. And I hope that HAAS has a chance to move up from the back of the pack. I think that it was great when they started, and I was so excited when HAAS came into F1 on their launch year, and they were really almost the best of the rest. They surprised everybody in their first year to 2 years. I think they started to decline quickly after that, but they were nearly the best of the rest. And I would love to see HAAS get back in the mix of the mid-pack. As for Nikita Mazepin, he's kind of a victim of circumstance, and F1 rarely gives certain second chances. We've seen it maybe in the past with Albon and Kvyat coming coming back in recent times. But we don't see that often. Usually when somebody kind of loses their shot with an F1, they're done. And it's mostly to those with the skill and not just the money that create a long career in Formula One. So I honestly, I hope for him that he finds a way to continue racing. I don't know what type of options will be available to him, but I think unless he sort of denounces his country of origin and defects, that I don't think he'll be able to race in too many FIA or globally sanctioned sort of race formats. And I maybe, after this ends, he can come back and find his way into GT and Le Mans racing or something like that as a backup, or DTM, or one of those types of racing classes and leagues that many people will go into if they didn't quite make it in F1. And if not, maybe if this takes a lot longer, or many years, or like we don't come back from what's happening globally, Russia may have their own type of Russian series that he can participate in. So it's not out of hate for Mazepin that I think it's right that F1 not move forward with him. It's really it's a bit of geopolitical, it's a bit of business, and what's best for the team and the results. So good luck to HAAS F1 for 2022, and let's have a great race season. I look forward to the first races. And hopefully, I think I'm going to bring more of these F1 videos on race topics. Maybe we'll talk about little Drive to Survive review or something along those lines, and do some type of like a reaction video. Maybe I can get somebody else in through like a web call or something like that to help me discuss this. All right, Spencer, this is the Italian Tune-Up. Thanks for watching if you made it all this way. Appreciate it.